trouble. Here we are again for another exciting episode. Dr. Brant Raven.
Yes, Mike the Llama, how are you this week?
Good. How are you?
Weather's fining up compared to what we had last week.
It is. Would you like some sunglasses for the reflection off my head?
Oh, look, don't tell everyone how old you are because
me?
Well, you know.
You say you're 30 every week, so
I do lie about my age. I make myself sound a little bit older, but yes.
Audio Pete.
Hello, everyone.
Very good.
There's,
All right.
There's the rich voice of the podcast.
Yes. All right.
What's our topic this week, Mike the Llama?
We're all science fiction fans here.
I don't like to admit it, but yes.
Yes, you do. You, in fact, do like to admit it.
For the sake of this discussion, let's say I am.
And quite a few of the stories that we have in science fiction include clones.
Clones, yes.
So maybe they're evil clones. Sometimes they replace you, you know, the old replicant. But what about in reality? Today's topic is about cloning. Is it ethical? Is it plausible? And what form should it take?
Well, we all know twins are evil to start.
Well, that's why I said that evil bit. When I was thinking about it, it's like, there's always... A twin is kind of like your clone, and one's always evil, so maybe that's the way it needs to work.
Well, I mean, I don't know what we're going to do with this topic. How are we going to talk about this?
All right, well, first of all, I want to talk about the ethics.
Right.
Tell me, what do you think the ethics...
It's hard to talk... Well, let's talk about the second point first. Is it possible? Yes, it is.
No, that's right.
It's possible and it's plausible and it can be done, and I'm sure as medicine gets a lot better and scientific discoveries get a lot better, I'm sure it's going to be a lot better the way we can do it. Of course, it can be done.
Well, it can be done. We've cloned a sheep.
Well, it's more.
We've cloned other things as well.
I think it's more than that. I think we've cloned quite a number of organisms.
But I'm talking human cloning is what I'm specifically talking about.
So what you're really saying is the classical scientific definition where you start with a bunch of cells and within a bunch of months you've got a human there. That's essentially the same as the person from which the cells were taken.
We can use you as the example.
Oh heavens!
Yeah, well,
I don't think.
Quite aside from how we all feel about that,
yeah,
one is enough. You can't mess with perfection.
No, you can't mess with perfection. Go.
All right. No, the ethics. So I want to talk about the ethics. So religions and religious people are possibly going to have some issues.
Yep. All of them are logical.
The whole thing. So is there a soul? Is it unique? Is it God-given? Blah, blah, blah. So if we create a person who is a replica of an existing person, we'll use you here, would they have the same rights?
Well, no one knows. No one knows.
Well, this is why we're having this conversation.
No one knows the answer to that. No one knows the...
So say this person grows up and is exactly the same as you, has the same everything and all that sort of stuff. They are you. Do we give them the same rights? Is it Raven Mark II?
Well,
how does it work?
I don't know. I mean, they are not me. You can't say that person is me. We don't have a definition for any of these things. We don't. What makes you you? What makes you you is really is all your experience in life. It's you are you, not because you have certain cells in certain positions. That could be defined as one aspect of who you are.
But when I want to get an identity card, when I want to get a Medicare card, when I want to get a passport, they don't say, tell me about your life experiences.
No, they don't.
They say, who are you?
Yeah.
And I would have to say, I'm Mike the Llama. And then the next one of me comes along and says, I am also Mike the Llama.
Do they have to have the same name?
Yeah, but would they
But it's
say
me.
that?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I guess
but
that's
they
true. We could say, all right,
necessarily-
there's Gary the Llama.
Yeah, no, but you're becoming irrational in your thinking.
I am, that's right. It
They
gets you
wouldn't.
speaking.
They wouldn't necessarily come out and say, "I'm Mike the Llama." They wouldn't necessarily do
Well,
that.
what if they were this evil clone who said they wanted...
No, forget good and evil.
All right.
What I'm saying is, how do you know that they're going to necessarily say that? They potentially won't even be called Mike. Secondly, if they are who you are, and they have the same sort of makeup and potential of who you are, they will have a completely different life experience to who you are. They're being made now, so by definition, they're living in the now. So they're going to have their experience in life is going to be vastly different to who you are. They're not going to be the same person. You don't know. You absolutely don't know what they're going to be.
That's true, but we're talking from a All right.
And
All right.
and you know, if I can apply, there's a whole, if I can get really pedantic and get down to the atomic,
You can, yes.
down to the atomic level, you don't know that even the makeup will be the same as you. I mean, we all know about the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, right? So,
Tell us again.
well, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle says that I can measure, say, at the quantum level, I can make a measurement of say an atom or a quanta, if I like. I can measure something, but I can't measure everything about that. I can measure its position, but not its speed. I can measure its speed, but not its position. I can't know everything about, say, a single atom. And if I take things at the atomic level, if I say that I'm going to clone someone and look at the atomic level of that person, the atoms that make you up today are not going to necessarily be in the same position or the same atoms that make your clone up tomorrow.
Did Heisenberg have many friends, out of interest? Anyway, carry on. So go on. I just thought he might have bored them all to death.
I'm just saying that the atomic nature of the person is potentially going to be, well, by definition, will likely be different to the atomic nature you make up.
Okay.
And if I look at that at a brain level, I'm going to say, well, maybe their brain is composed differently. Because their brain is composed differently, they won't be the same person. Mm-hmm. So therefore, their experience is going to be completely different to your experience. They may be more positive. They may be more negative. You don't know. And so therefore, that person, your clone, is not you. It is a different person.
Okay.
Externally, they may look like you. That can't be argued. But they're not you. And you're right. From an identifying perspective, the person who's issuing, say, a license or a permit or whatever, they're going to look at what they look like. But I mean, that sort of happens today anyway. I mean, it doesn't mean they're going to be like you. I mean,
no, well, that's true. Well, I mean, you can't.
They will look like you, but they won't be you. That would be my argument, right? They're going to look like you, but they won't be you.
Okay.
They're going to be completely different to who you are.
Okay, so assume that this can happen then, that there's this cloning thing, and it's the closest thing to you that you can get. Okay, is this then, or would this particular thing then be part of the realm of the rich? Only rich people can clone themselves. Because...
Well, how do you answer that freaking question?
Well, because...
You asked the most tenuous questions. I mean, is it part of the realm of the rich? I mean, come on.
They are lead-in questions to other things that we get to. So
I don't know. Why? I mean, essentially, the answer to the question is yes. Mm-hmm. History has shown us that whenever there's anything new, be it an exotic material or an exotic food brought over from another country in the Middle Ages, or be it a brand new technology that's being built today or whatever, or some sort of stupidly wealthy fancy car that some idiot wants to buy. These things are always the realm of the rich to begin with.
Yes.
And as they scale, they become more available. Now, would something like cloning become more available? Who knows? I mean, usually availability depends on whether the thing is essential or not. And it depends on, how quickly... is it essential? If it's essential, then it becomes more available. How quickly can you bring something over? Or how quickly can you grow it or build it? Then the quicker I can grow it, the bigger I can, the quicker I can build something, the greater I have supply of. Greater supply lowers the price or the overall cost of something. And therefore it becomes available to more people.
Okay, so cloning would then become part of a capitalist society.
Yes, it would.
So that means that the rich people will clone themselves, and we'll have a dozen Rupert Murdochs wandering around.
Yes,
and the rest of us
potentially, that's true.
Okay,
potentially that's true. And going back to the point I made earlier, those clones of, say, someone like, let's take Trump, because Trump's in the news at the moment, right? Trump, being wealthy, would clone himself. There would be several Trumps roaming around. They wouldn't be Donald Trump, but they would have his essential makeup. Now, based on what I said before, the way that those clones might think might vary based on the atomic structure of their brain. And I'm saying this without knowing necessarily any real thing about neuroscience. But the atomic structure of their brain would likely be different, so the way they think would likely be different. And their experiences would be different, so the way they think would definitely be different.
Well, I would say that they will get, if you're
But they are
cloning-
but let me make my point. But they are likely maybe to think like, more likely to think like Donald Trump than to not think like Donald Trump. Do you want those people roaming around? I don't know. That's a question we would have to ask.
I would say that if someone clones themselves, they're more likely to have an influence over how that person grows up and develops and thinks.
Right.
So they are, as much as you say,
and that
it's
is
not
a
the same person, they are going to be influenced a lot by that
right.
particular
I
person.
would agree, and that is a classical sci-fi plot that's out there. The person clones himself and has an influence. Yes. Okay, what's your point in all of this, though? Because you make no points.
No, I guess I'm just trying to establish the ethics behind doing it. So is it an ethical thing? If you can clone you, then someone can clone Hitler.
These
someone
podcasts really started because you and I argued a lot, and we're hardly arguing on these things.
Oh, I'm trying to... Hold on, you're arguing.
Yeah,
Tell me
well, it's because the points you make are so, they're like a fart in a spacesuit. They really are. Come on, make some points.
All right, what about social issues?
What about social
It's
issues?
hard enough for you to maintain your own identity online now. What if there's multiple versions of you out there?
Well, it's a problem. Yeah, what's your point though? I mean, I don't understand.
I'm trying.
I mean, what are we saying? We say cloning good or cloning bad?
No, well, that's what we're trying to establish. What we're trying to do, and this is why I'm peppering you with these points, not to make silly arguments, but because it's part of an overall consideration before you say, yeah, you know what, we should go ahead with cloning, or no, I think that there are some problems with it that are potentially dangerous, or quite aside from the whole genetic. Whether it's potentially
Again,
dangerous.
as I've said for many times and for other podcasts, you've got to look at the net benefit. Why do I want to clone someone? Why do I want to do that?
I imagine if we look at sci-fi, then some of the reasons, like one of the Jurassic Park movies, didn't someone clone a child that had died, or someone because they missed them so much that they...
There was something like that,
Sounds
yeah.
familiar.
And I imagine that might be the case, that people who've lost a child may want to... Because they do it with pets now already. You can, in certain places, you can get your pet.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely
cloned.
right.
Can you?
If
You're
miss
right.
your
Yeah, you
pet,
can.
Yeah, if you had a beloved
Oh, you
pet.
absolutely can.
So
Yeah.
I imagine that extending to lost children, and
So how's that for ethics though?
Yeah,
that feels a little dodgy to me.
I think that will be the first cases that we see of people wanting clones of humans, where someone has...
So a child, so
Yeah.
it's some family member has died,
Yeah.
and rather than dealing with the grief, you make a new one.
Yes, you get one to replace the
I would
whole
argue that that's
heart.
the sort of person who is least suited to actually going ahead and making a clone.
I agree, but I don't think anyone is suited to making a clone. I don't think there's any reason to clone things.
Really?
No, not really. The only reason you may want to clone something would be
harvesting their organs for you.
well, that would be one reason, a medical reason,
Medical
right? And
reason?
then that introduces a whole bunch of whole bunch of ethical problems, right? So that would be the medical reasons would be one reason, and the other reason you would potentially want to clone is if you were able to, if you had a great mind, if there was a great mind out there in society. So I'll take Einstein as the classic great mind. If you could clone Einstein, and again, as part of that cloning process, maintain his mind, maintain his ability to think like he was and his knowledge, but now he's a younger man and he's free of disease and he's going to survive. And then we clone him again when that clone gets to the end of their life, and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of great and amazing minds out there at the moment. Tons and tons of great minds out there. None in this room, but if you could do that by the cloning process, then you know what? That might actually be a reasonable thing to do. That might actually be the very definition of evolution of the human race, right? Because part of the evolution of the human race, you've got to take technology into account. In fact, if you look at the Drake equation for how many alien civilizations are out there, one of the variables in the Drake equation is is how technologically advanced are they to have survived a supernova, for example, to have survived a meteor storm or asteroid destruction.
Some sort of hat. might be needed to. Anyway, look what I was saying.
But that's what I'm saying. I'm saying for you, you've really got to look at net benefits. It's like all the other podcasts we've made. Net benefits.
Yeah.
What is the net benefit of doing this action?
Okay, but I think rather than so the second part of where I was going, this page 2, this one here was the net benefits. The first thing is to establish whether it is ethical to do it in the first place, and that's why I'm asking all these other questions.
No,
so
you can't establish whether it's ethical without understanding the net benefits. You need to look at
when you're dealing with people, though. That's the
no,
entire
you've got to
point.
look at the net benefit and then understand whether it's ethical or not.
Well, hold on. So we we clone you,
Yes.
and we have a new Dr. Raven.
Well,
purely
no,
so
you have a new
Dr. Raven replicant,
Yeah,
purely so you can harvest their organs if you have any dramas.
right.
Ethical or not?
Well,
Are you dealing with a person
on the
or
face of it, I would have to say not.
Right.
On the face of it, I would have to say not.
But why? The net benefits for you are fantastic.
Yeah, well, yeah, they are. But if you look at it, you've got to look at the replicant, to call them that. You would have to look at that replicant as potentially a sentient being.
Oh, do you mean what I was talking about on page 1, whether I was saying, do we accept this person's right? Do they have rights? Do they not have rights? His questions were relevant. Okay, so what I'm asking you is, what rights do you give this person before you're quite prepared to chop them up and use their organs?
But we can't really make that decision. You'd have to, you would have to enact those rights into law.
Yep.
Where do rights where do rights come from? This is where you start getting the religious question, where you say, God, the rights of humans and human existence.
Yeah, but we
come
dismissed
from
that
God.
early when I said religion and religious people are going to have some issues about it. They had issues about gay people getting married, so I'm not sure I really care about their views on this.
Those are flawed.
Put it this way, we've got something similar where, say if a child is suffering from bone marrow disorder or that.
Yep.
I don't know about Australia, but in America, they often encourage the parents to have another child who may be a compatible donor. And often the parents do have this. Have you thought about this, Mike the Llama?
No.
Oh. Is that why I thought you might have been pointing something out there?
No,
that's really horrible. Isn't it?
But it does happen. But
it does happen. But Pete, that's really horrible, right? I mean, imagine
not so much if they were thinking about having another child anyway. What's the big deal? But the big deal is for that child. Often they have to harvest these, whatever it is, and it's not. We're not talking about they have to give up their heart and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's usually a blood or
bone marrow or whatever. Yeah.
But it's invasive, and they often don't. They
Or a
have to
kidney.
harvest them before
Kidney
they
as
have the capacity to really make a decision for themselves. And this happens already. It's already a part of this.
Wow.
You're breeding so you have a suitable donor.
Yeah. And that's where I think cloning may happen. Like if you had
There's no one more suitable than yourself.
Yeah. And you might be able to edit those genes in a clone and so that person doesn't have that genetic disorder.
You would. In fact, there's I forget CRISPR. CRISPR, I think, is what they use to edit the genes. And
the other thing I was wondering is, what if the cloning was just cloning your organs rather than making a person? So that eliminates the...
That's completely ethical.
Yeah, so eliminates
that's fine.
the issue.
I got no problem with that at all. If you can grow me a heart and I need a new heart,
Bring it on.
Then bring it on.
Yeah,
A kidney, a heart, bone marrow, blood, whatever. Yeah,
that's probably where it would start anyway, isn't it? Yeah, just heart.
That is perfectly that then.
Net benefit, no harm. Yeah.
That brings together a completely different argument then about whether I should be allowed to survive for
Ever.
200, 300, 400 years, right?
You personally, or just anyone?
And that creates the further argument. That creates the ship argument. The old argument where I've got a wooden ship and I'm going out to explore, and as I explore, the ship breaks down. So I'm replacing bits and pieces on the ship.
Yeah. Is it the original ship?
How much do I have to replace before?
I've done that with my lawnmower.
Right.
I've had one for 20 years, but none of it is the original.
There you go.
Right, but it's still going.
It's still going. It's a great.
That's why I tore up my lawn. Yeah. All right, so we have.
It's a tough one. Look. And again, I think you asked me: would a clone, a full
Yeah, full on human
sentient clone.
Yeah.
Well, there's another point. Would they even be human?
Well,
Why not?
they're created by a human, so isn't that how normal
What is
humans
it?
are?
What is it? What is it that makes a human human? What is human? Human, argue you could
A touch of tenderness?
Well, no.
Oh no, that's Milton the Monster. Sorry, go on.
Thank you for that. And I think you've just got us demonetised, but yeah, like we're monetised to begin with.
Yes.
No, don't sue us, Hanna-Barbera.
No.
But yeah, I mean, what makes us human? You could say that what makes us human is the fact that we are on an evolutionary branch. We are an ape. We are not descendant from apes, as a lot of people think. We are an ape, right? We are evolved from a.
I notice you're looking hairier than usual as well. So
we are from a previous evolution. Okay, so where would a clone fit within that structure? That's in itself interesting.
Is that stalling our evolution? If we're cloning, aren't we maintaining the same level that we're at?
No, no, we're not necessarily.
Without fiddling with the DNA, without fiddling with the genes.
No, I don't think it is. No, because we would still evolve. Humans would still evolve.
Yeah, but not if we're all clones.
And it all depends on what you want to define as evolution. You know, two people who are non-clones are still going to go and have sex and produce a third person and more, and that third person would be an evolved being based on their set of circumstances, their genetics, their epigenetics, their experiences, and so forth. So that person, the human race, would continue to evolve to whatever it would ultimately get to. The clones, if I don't know. I mean, I don't know what evolution would mean for a clone. For a cloned being, I don't know. That's actually a very interesting question. And if Dr. Dawkins is listening, you know,
That's right.
the greatest evolutionary biologist to probably have ever lived, maybe Richard Dawkins, maybe you could come to our podcast and help us discuss this, because I would love to discuss this with you.
I guess you're talking probably mental evolution in that. So,
No, I'm not. I'm
because you
talking
can't-
about any. I'm not.
No, but if you continually clone, so we have you, and we
Yes.
continually clone you, and you learn more and more stuff. That's not changing your genetics. So you're not
No,
going to evolve.
it is. No, it is.
Is it
in
really?
fact, yeah. There's good studies. There's good studies that show that the evolution of a person involves their experiences.
Okay.
So, for example, you are a composition of your parents' genetics. And there may have been some things that have changed within those genetics that cause you to evolve slightly better, or slightly worse, depending on whatever the situation was. But your parents' experiences, not just their genetics, but their experiences have made it into your genes, and so your evolution is not only based on their physical makeup at the genetic level, but it's based on their mental makeup, based on their experiences. And that's itself interesting. So if you've just cloned someone, you've now got to ask, well, what's that person's or that being's experiences? How do they evolve? Where do they fit on the whole evolutionary tree, and how do they evolve going forward? And, you know, what does their evolution mean? And then you've got to, you know, are they allowed to procreate with themselves? Are they allowed to procreate with other beings?
Again, this is the whole thing about the different laws and rights.
Yeah,
and things,
are they subject to the same rights? Which
someone tells you to go fuck yourself, maybe you can.
Yeah, so it's a whole bunch of interesting questions, and I don't think
it's a lot of effort just to get to that point.
We have just reached a stage in various Western countries where we are rightfully happy to look at people of who are interested in the same sex, and we look at those people now and we say that's fine, and that's
maybe there's a way that they can have their own kids.
And I'm just saying we've just evolved that idea that people should be allowed to be intimate with people of the same sex and allowed to marry, and they have the same rights and everything, which to me, the idea that we once didn't have that idea is a foreign concept to me. But anyway.
But maybe it wouldn't have been to you 200 years ago.
Well, yeah, 200 years ago, I may have owned a slave and hated gay people, and these days I find both of those things
disgusting,
primarily reprehensible. But I'm saying we've just reached that stage. Do you think we are really ready to start prescribing the rights of a clone? I don't think we are.
Well, that's right, and obviously these things happen in stages. And I guess
why would we think of clones as anything different than you would to an identical twin? And say,
well, we don't know.
One of them.
Well, we don't know.
Why would, if they're born either through a surrogate?
Well, we don't know. Well, that's
why don't we know? Why don't we just say, well, they have the rights as any independent?
Well, we can. We can.
Because they're certainly going to expect those rights.
Yeah, well,
we can make that declaration, and I think if
they're not going to come out and say, "Oh, don't tell me everything," they're going to come out as.
I am a drone clone,
Yeah, they're not going to be like a robot that's empty and needs programming.
Not an empty vessel.
Human.
Well, we can make that declaration, and in a lot of ways...
But they'll have that right whether we declare it or not.
Maybe that's something that should be done now to avoid the dramas down the track. We just say, when we eventually get to it, it's a person you're creating.
It's difficult to know... It's difficult to prescribe now because we don't know where we're going to get to. We don't know what we will end up with. But I see what you're saying, and and Audio Pete, I get what you're saying as well. I mean, it's a totally valid point. Why would we think of them as anything different? It's a completely valid point. And this is where sci-fi is really interesting, because sci-fi makes these points for us. And sci-fi is both positive and negative in this way. I think if you started talking about clones to anyone in general, they will look at that and say, oh, well, what if they turn evil against us? Well, where are they getting that idea from? They're getting that idea from sci-fi, right? And likewise, you're making a point and saying, well, why would we think of them as anything different? Well, you're probably making that point because, as an educated person, you've probably read different sci-fi where that point is made. So both points are actually, well, I don't know about the evil point, if that's valid, but certainly
I don't think it's valid. I think it was purely a mocking of twins. Yes,
because of
twins being one evil.
Because we do know that twins are evil.
But certainly the point of why would with our minds and with our thinking today, why would they not have the same?
Yeah, they don't know that. So suppose they never met their clone. They would just think of themselves as any ordinary person.
That's another wonderful representation of the problem.
Is that the purpose? Again, comes down to a purpose. I would say the purpose of a clone is not to be created and let off on their own, so that they never meet the person they've been cloned from.
What if the clone truck crashed and they escaped and they never met? There's a whole lot of reasons. Or their DNA got in someone else's hands and they were manufactured in another country.
Again, it comes down to, as you say, it comes down to purpose. Why are we doing this, right? And I would suspect one of the major reasons would be medical reasons, and I suspect that you could probably, going forward, clone the heart or bone marrow or bone or whatever without having to clone the being, right? If there are situations where you can't avoid it, you must clone the being in order to clone the medical bit that you want, well, then you would have to put proper checks and balances and rights in place. That being would have to have the same rights by definition.
All right, so that part there was something else I'd written down as well. So say we do get to that stage. Aren't you also creating your own alibi for any just we can let's just for a moment visit the fact that these may be evil clones. So you may, people do bad things, and sometimes some of them commit crimes. If we rely on the highest level, aside from detective work or whatever, the highest level of evidence we have for proving something is the DNA evidence. So suddenly we have someone who shares the same DNA as you.
Yes.
And they say, well, this is your DNA. There's no suddenly I say, well, hold on a minute. I have a clone.
Yeah, but DNA evidence in the courts is not. It's not just DNA evidence.
No, it's not. It's eyewitness account, which is notoriously unreliable, but it's also a thing. It is detective work, which is is work on things. But that's still all pointing to one person. But if there are two of that person, how would you then...
Well, I don't know. I mean, what a silly question.
It's a silly question, but the point of it is, it's something you would need to take into
Hey,
consideration.
Audio Pete, do you know anyone else that can run this podcast seriously? Someone with better questions.
Oh, but he writes all the points down there. He does put a bit of...
I mean, come on.
Maybe if
he's
my
asking-
clone came along, it could do...
He's asking sci-fi type
Your
questions.
best
I am asking
question.
you that
Your
question.
best question is alibi. Really?
I would say even if you do have two people with exactly the same DNA, they're clones, they will still like get freckles in different spots.
Well,
and
that's
things
true.
like that.
That's true, but...
And one might get herpes and the other doesn't.
You
I've
seem
mentioned herpes.
fixated on herpes.
The
Yeah,
DNA,
I've
the
mentioned herpes
DNA
at
is
the time.
obviously going to be the same,
Yes.
right? And it would basically mean that you could not use DNA. You would have to use other evidence.
This is why I'm asking the question. So, they have things... When you buy a knife, it says, do not insert in people.
Really? Does it say that?
There are things like that. That's the whole point of these things. Life is set out to cater for the lowest common denominator because you have to cater for these people because that's when things go wrong. It's like,
What's your point?
My
It can
point
go wrong.
is, if you're going to create a person who is your replica, who is a clone, you have to take into consideration. Stop yawning. You have to take into consideration the shitty, dodgy bits at the edges. Like, well, you know what? Suddenly this invalidates DNA being the
But we
be
just
all and
said
end all.
don't-
Suddenly it means that I can't say.
Don't create a person.
Well,
There's
The
no
other thing
reason.
is, this clone
This
is
is
not
my-
going to be the same age as you either. They're actually going to be...
He was a child. Oh, well, that
somewhat
wasn't me.
younger. They're
Yeah.
not going to... If they're a surrogate, if you, as an adult...
Yeah, all right, okay. Yeah,
They
no,
may
there's
be,
a-
that may
there's
be the way that
no-
the court differentiates between the 35-year-old
That's,
who
is that
committed
me?
the murder,
Oh, thanks.
yes,
Yeah,
and the 3-year-old who may not have
How do you know
managed
it? How do you know it wasn't me? Well, he
Yeah.
was 3. Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's all
It
right.
was me, but 3.
Yeah.
He didn't have a cue ball for a head.
Yes. All right. So you get my point, though. You need to have
No.
all these things.
I don't.
No, you do. Rather than you saying,
Oh, okay.
"Well, it's all about the money and the net benefit," you have to also take into consideration the legal aspect. You have to take into.
Hang on.
Well, then you
excuse
just
me.
dismissed that
excuse me.
before by
net
saying
benefits.
no
that
one-
includes the word net. I think captures
Yeah, all right,
the
okay.
legal aspects. It's the net benefit, the net considerations that need to be made. I mean, come on. Of course, you've got to consider these things. They're all important.
Yes, they are all important.
You know?
What if you could? You know, we were talking about before. You had no problems with them cloning a heart or a lung.
Yes.
What if they could clone everything except the brain? Like they could create in a lab a human that had everything except maybe just the hypothalamus to keep all the body bits going, but then no actual cortex. That you could, when you are old, you could get your brain transplanted into this new body that had everything except the brain.
Oh, yeah, go on.
Would you have any problem
He's
with that?
intrigued by your idea.
Would you have, because that's probably, if you look at it scientifically, the only real option
for actually having a person.
having a long, being immortal, is to keep creating a new body that just had the, because essentially we are our brains. We are,
yeah.
And if we were able to transplant our brains into a new body of ourselves that had everything except the brain, so you're not actually taking a person away. You're not
But you're
killing
making
a person.
you're assuming that the
Yeah.
brain that you're transplanting,
Yes,
your own brain,
brain.
doesn't atrophy, right? You're-
Yeah, we'll just say that
You're making that assumption.
Brain, I think brains
Except they
generally
kinda
can
do,
live,
don't they?
live longer or last longer than our bodies.
Well, I don't
the rest
know.
of
I
our
don't know
bodies.
if that's the case, but let's make the assumption that it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're saying, is that ethical?
Yeah, would that be?
Yeah, I think that's pretty normal.
If you're
I
doing
think
it to
it's okay.
yourself,
Yeah. If you could grow it in a lab or
Yeah,
whatever.
I think that's okay. I actually think that's okay. Again, it all comes down to what makes a being, and I think what makes a being is the brain. The minute that you've got the brain in there, that brain starts experiencing stimulus, and therefore starts learning. It starts connecting with its real world, and that's right at the child level. The minute a child is born, bang, stimulus, right? Light and all sorts. I'm crying my head off. Stimulus, and it's at that level that you then have a problem. That you've got a being. But if you could grow everything and not the brain, then no, I don't see a problem with that. You're basically growing, instead of growing one organ and replacing your heart, you're growing all the organs and replacing the brain into
So what
those
about
organs.
instances where, and this has happened before, where you have kids who are born in that particular state. They don't have the brain, but they've got everything else. They are still given the same rights because they are a person. And what you're saying, you're creating someone exactly the same as that.
Well, I don't know. Have there been instances really where...
Yes, where people have been born without a brain.
Without a brain?
Yep.
They're really...
Yes.
Okay, I suppose I can imagine that. Well, I'm not... I can't talk to the legal reasons why that might be the case. There's going to be legal reasons why that person would have been declared as being a person. I would have to look at those reasons and decide whether I agree with them or not. But without knowledge of those reasons, I would have to say I don't agree. And again, I'm taking a position where I don't have knowledge.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have knowledge on those things, so I'm taking that position. Yeah, and
No.
but my position may change if I were to read further on these points to understand why those laws were enacted. I mean, one reason, the reasons I could never agree with would be religious ones. I could never agree with someone that said, "Oh, well, God made that person." No, that's ridiculous.
Well, I think again, the part of what would trouble them with that is if you get to the point where you can actually just create someone, then you've kind of proven to them that you didn't need God.
Well,
and so they're going to struggle, and they will probably try very hard to prevent it from happening because, that's their business.
Well, that's half of the reason why we have so many problems in the world. That's why, for example, countries like India are way ahead of the game when they come down to stem cell research. Because they have no religious problem. One of the most religious countries in the world has no religious problem to take an embryo and do something with that and to do research with that. Whereas places like America and Australia do have a problem, and it's all religious based, right? And so when you take a religious argument, and again, I don't want to make this podcast into one about religion. We could certainly, I think we've already done that, haven't we? I'm not sure.
We touch on it a fair bit. Much like, no, I won't say that.
Yeah. So I'm saying, when you introduce religion into it, you introduce a problem, right? That's the bottom line.
So the bit that we were looking at the moment, before we get to cloning, before we're cloning individual parts, is we're looking at the manipulation of genes and DNA to change things. So that's if a kid who hasn't been born has a problem, you can do altering of that sort of thing. How would you feel if there was something that they found out that they could discover that made us a bit more impervious to things like ultraviolet light, or help us cope with the ravages that will come with climate change? If there was, we're not cloning now. We're just talking about manipulating things to beyond where they normally could be. We're not fixing a problem. We're altering something to. It's not within the.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
I understand.
They've talked about this, like if we were going to live on Mars and things like that, they could actually genetically engineer people so that they were more
resilient
to those conditions.
Yeah. Okay.
I would have no problem with that whatsoever, and I think it actually makes sense that you head down that path. Right? I don't particularly have a problem with that. I would put caveats around it, though. It has to be available to absolutely everyone. You can't make that available only to some people, because then you're creating what you're doing. Then is it's a problem with eugenics. Then.
But isn't it how our health system is anyway, to a certain extent?
Well, it is, and that's
a problem.
And that's a problem. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Right. I'm saying if you're going to do that, you're going to do that for everyone.
Yep.
I don't know. Climate change is a big one, right? So let's talk that.
Yep.
if I can alter a child's genes in utero,
Nice.
where they're better resilient to climate change, then yes, that's fine. I would consider that as a normal part of our evolution. Evolution is a biological thing, but it does have a technological aspect, and the biology is augmented in a lot of ways by the technology. You know, and that we have that even today. The fact that we can look something up on the internet, the fact that we are inundated by the ability to learn more and understand
So
more.
it's speeding things up.
Yeah, speeding things up. So therefore our brains are likely to get bigger and bigger and bigger because we're consuming more knowledge. We're getting more information, right? Now, one could argue whether knowledge is good or bad. You know, is it better to look at an
Depends
Instagram
what you do with
influencer,
it.
You know? So you know, am I better for Instagram or not? I would say not, and the research has proven this.
Yes.
But yeah, it comes down to that. If I can use technology to change the way I may biologically evolve, then I've got no problem with that. Absolutely, as long as it's available to everyone, right? It makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it's the maintenance of the human race, right? It's the maintenance of how we continue living.
Do you reckon
Mate,
someone's doing that now? Working on
I
it?
reckon there would be some people working on it. Absolutely, absolutely. And if they're not working on it, they should be. And you first heard it here. So
Yes.
we own the patent.
Correct.
It's mostly in Korea and China that this is happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is already. Yeah, they're the ones pushing for de-extinction and things like that. The technology to bring back extinct animals by cloning viable DNA from frozen.
That's
Well,
where
again,
that's where it's all going to be tested, I guess, isn't it? Bringing back extinct animals.
Well, again,
and
I mean, that's another interesting point. Why do I want to freaking bring back an extinct animal?
What about a Tasmanian tiger?
Okay. Why
Thylacine.
do I want to do that? Why? Why?
To restore, if they're trying to bring an area back to the way it was, to restore the natural fauna to an area. And
They were the high level predator, so they're the ones who would be
Fine, but they died out naturally. I mean, I don't know.
they didn't.
No,
They were shot.
No, they did not.
Yeah, but I could argue that is a natural thing that happened.
Being
That's
shot.
Yes, they died out naturally. Humans got to a point.
Is that what happened in America? All those people getting shot, they're dying out naturally.
Well, no, I don't want to go down that particular path.
Well,
but
let's
I'm just
backtrack a bit then. Yes.
Well, I'm just saying, right? You could make the argument and say humans evolved to a point where they were able to develop technology, guns, and they then took care of business and shot a whole bunch of animals.
I would argue against what it is you're suggesting because I don't believe there's anything natural about an animal or a species being hunted to extinction.
Well, you could argue that point, but you'd be wrong.
Well, no, I don't believe it would be.
Yeah, you could absolutely argue that point.
You can say survival of the fittest. Think of
It's
the
like-
dodo. They all got eaten because that was the only thing they were big
Actually,
and chicken
that
sized.
is a fallacy because
Yeah.
dodo bird actually tasted horrible.
Well,
If you read enough about this, I have a book.
yes.
And dodo birds were not really. I think they died out for different reasons.
Were they in fact shooting them because they were tasty, or were they killing them
think
because they were
they-
the only thing they could
No,
frickin'
I
eat?
I think
think
they
they-
were like in New Zealand, they were just easy to catch.
Well, because they're stupid and couldn't fly.
They initially, I think, if I remember what I read correctly, they were initially shot and killed for food.
Yep.
But then they didn't taste very nice, and I can't remember why or how they died out.
Well, they
but,
probably killed enough of them to begin with that it compromised their ability to breed.
Madagascar,
and maintain.
if I'm not mistaken.
Mauritius.
I knew it began with an M.
Very good.
Yeah.
Off Madagascar.
Yeah.
So yeah, all right.
Yeah,
but
but
I
again,
don't think that's natural.
No, it is perfectly natural. You've got to think of natural as simply beyond biological, right? Take for example, we are destroying the habitat of the orangutan.
Yep.
Right, and we're
Because
doing
we love our sugary
right.
corn, whatever
So
it
what
is.
are we?
things.
Why is that? Because we're planting more corn, or we're planting more
We're removing their habitat, so we're putting more palm
trees or something.
whatever. Palm
yeah.
oil trees.
Yeah. So you may not like that. I don't like
I
that.
know. I don't think anyone would like that, except for the people making the money
Right.
I
selling
don't think the orangutans like it very
They're not
No,
so keen.
I
on
don't.
it, no.
I don't like that, and I don't want to see the orangutan getting extinct I'm simply saying that you could make the argument that it is a natural evolution of things, that this is the path it would take. You could make that argument, right? I don't want to see them extinct. Please don't write in and think that I'm a horrible person.
Especially because he can't say orang utan.
Yeah.
Anyway, carry on.
I don't want them to see them extinct, and I don't think we necessarily need palm oil. I don't think we need to. There are other alternatives, right? But it's easy to get. It's easy to plant. People make money off it, and so you could argue it is a natural evolution of the human condition that we will kill everything that we have.
I would argue that would be a devolution, because we're making wrong decisions and going backwards.
And that is a perfectly reasonable argument. I think you could argue that as well. So, what are we talking about again?
Clones.
We got to orangutans.
That's right. I think we're about out of time anyway. So, all right. So you're happy for a clone as long as they're not alive, and as long as you can use their organs for your own goodliness.
I'm happy for a clone as long as there's, again with everything else, as long as there's a good reason to have a clone.
Yeah.
And a good reason could be a medical benefit. It could be maintaining a great mind.
Yep.
It could be maintaining your own mind. I'm happy for those things. And if you do have a clone and you've created a new being, in my view, that being has the same
rights and
alienable rights.
That got a little bit interesting.
Alienable, but
right. All right. You feel free to say that again if you want.
No.
Okay. All right. We will. We'll finish this one up. Thank you, Dr. Raven.
Anything else?
No, we were just discussing whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, and I think we've decided it's neither.
I hope we've pricked someone's bubble yet again.
I'm not sure we have.
I hope we've been a prick in your bubble.
Nice.
And look, again,
Bubbles was a chimp, not an orangutan.
I encourage everyone to like, comment, and subscribe.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Audio Pete. Thank you, Dr. Brant Raven.